This is Bilfina. Thank you, room number 2. Room number 3, Andrew was in here, Cece was in here, Leo was in here, I was in here too. What did we come up with, amazing group?
I think I was nominated to talk, and I was lucky to be in such a great group. Oh my gosh. We actually our guideline was very similar to the first from group 1, and it was there's space for all of us here. So you know, again, sort of reflecting on space and allowing for different types of communication styles, and then also attempting to alleviate like problematic or toxic group dynamics, so that everyone can sort of, you know, move the way that they need, and to uphold that.
Thank you, Cece. This is Bofina speaking again. Not because I was in that group, but that's a heavy hitter group now. Child, I don't know. Y'all got some competition, other groups. So room number 4, we got Liz, Lou, Nadine, and Paige. What did y'all come up with?
We also did not designate a speaker. So if someone else wants to, you know, jump in on this, we actually really sort of talked a lot about like, what is the language? How do we find shared definitions, even to begin a conversation about guidelines? We didn't have like a tidy sentence that we came up with. But we were really talking about like a key to guidelines is understanding both a kind of shared definition of what a guideline is and what the accountability is, so that we all understand what it looks like when a guideline might be crossed. I don't know, does anyone else, did I sum that up in a way?
I wrote avoid assuming terminology.
That's tidier.
I love that. Avoid assuming terminology. And then, okay, can we type that into the chat, please? This is Bofina speaking. And so I think that was all of our groups, right? We covered all of our groups. And so we're going to go ahead and share our screen. We'll give Bo a few minutes. And can we have somebody please read the 5 collective community guidelines that we've come up with? Wow, look at all of y'all raising your hands. I don't even know who to call on first. Oh my goodness. Man, where do we go? Go ahead, Liz. I see your hand, Liz. Or Lydia. Or was that Lydia? Oh, Lord Jesus, I done messed up now. Y'all okay. I'm just kidding.
Shared community guidelines. Number 1 says, we acknowledge and honor all forms of communication and engagement. Number 2 says, space to fumble, space to ask questions. Number 3, agreeing on a safe word to ground us in our shared agreements. Number 4, there's space for all of us here. Number 5, avoid assuming terminologies.
Thank you. And so if we all agree to kind of move in this way, you can use a reaction, you can use a little heart, you can use a thumb up, just to let us know that we're all on the same page. If there's a community member who's like, nah, I don't like none of that, y'all gonna have to try again, you can let us know. Y'all feeling it? We good? All right, beautiful. Thank you all so much for that. And now I'm going to pass it to Kimmy.
Thank you, Bofina. This is Kimmy speaking. Thank you all so much for starting to get into this process with us. Now that we've had a chance to kind of have this get to know your group members and start to get on the same page around what we need from one another in this space, we wanted to take a moment to just use that group guidelines experience to begin our reflection around thinking about the roles that we play. So we're on slide 8 where it says reflect and share. What was it like co-creating community guidelines with folks you may not know? what role did you find yourself in? And how does this relate to the role that you find yourself playing in community? So if you're somebody who is new to collective or community-based work, you are invited to use that kind of initial experience of getting together with the folks in your breakout group to think about what role you found yourself playing and why, and how you know you played that role. If you're somebody who is actively involved in other collective processes outside of the space, we invite you to use that first breakout group as just kind of a starting point to think about the role that you play in community. And we're gonna take about 60 seconds to sit with our thoughts and kind of start to get our ideas going. And then after the 60 seconds, we'll come back and have kind of, just a brief group discussion where you'll be invited to share. So in this moment, if it's helpful for you to like draw or do a free write or doodle or even just sit still, any of that is kind of welcome. So I'm gonna time us for about 60 seconds.
I can be brave.
Yay, thank you.
My name is Kate. I go with she and ours. I am very busy background of a room with shelves and all sorts of stuff that I didn't clean up before coming in here, and windows. And I have blonde hair with bangs, big old glasses that are reflecting back the screen, and a purple bandana that is a favorite of mine. I was thinking about this time only a little bit, but definitely have remembered thinking this in other spaces a lot. What am I saying about myself by acknowledging this guideline? Like, how are these people in this room gonna think, who don't know me, gonna think of me because I say this one sentence acknowledging possibly everything that I care about, which I was performing there with lots of irony.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, totally. That kind of like nervousness and fear of judgment is a very, I think, like significant thing to acknowledge when you come together with folks that you maybe haven't met before. Are there any other reflections that folks want to share?
I think I'm having trouble like orienting myself to the context of this workshop. Like I think of rules, like there are values that you can have applicable to every meeting, but like knowing what the purpose of the meeting is very important, or the collective effort. Maybe I just need to like read the PDF or something before, but I feel a little bit confused.
Thank you for sharing that. Delphina, I see you unmuted.
Oh, Delphina speaking, you didn't take up space. I think that is what we are seeing in the conversations we're having and the questioning is part of the workshop. I tell people all the time that, excuse me, when we're doing workshops, it's not just about the content, but actually how we're engaging. It's almost an experience in what it is we came for. And so what we know is when we come into a new community, we are going to be, oftentimes we start off confused because we don't know each other. We don't know each other's background. We don't really know how each other are coming to this work. And so part of the work of collective sharing of space is digging through that confusion so that we can create a sense of why are we here. And so I'm actually glad that people are feeling that and having these questions, because it is the process of community building and coming together that we are confused because we're fumbling towards an understanding of why we're even doing this. And so I don't want you to feel like saying that and acknowledging that is on you, but also seeing that as part of the process. And then the next step is, how do we trust our community to say that there's a possibility that might be, we gonna figure this out as we're pushing through. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And then add part of the role that I saw having in my community. And I think it relates to how I am in my my everyday, was this role of almost like clarifying. I think my group can say, so someone would say something and I say, and they might say, oh, I'm not sure how to put this into words, or I'm not sure how this sound. And then I found my role being, oh, okay, I heard this. This is how I phrased it before. Is this what you're saying? And so when you asked that question, Kimmy, I realized that that's something I do in my everyday life anyway, that process of clarifying. So it was beautiful to see how we all were able to kind of like, Andrew threw out an idea, and then I kind of helped clean it up, and then Cece affirmed it, and then Leia was like, I'm taking notes on it. So that is kind of the role that I saw myself taking during my breakout group. Welcome back, y'all. Okay, so let's get into it. So part of this workshop and in thinking about when we're creating toolkits in our communities, is first us understanding like, what are the elements of community? What the hell do we mean when we say community? What does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. But press one. Oh, thank you, Nadine. Thank you for saying I have great energy. You're such a sweetie pie. Thank you. I'm trying not to bore y'all to death now. We all got to do our part, okay? This virtual world is hard. And so here's some 3 kind of big elements that we wanted to make sure we highlight. Of course, the definition of community is expansive. And like we said in the beginning, it means different things to different people. But we wanted to highlight 3 components of how we approach community as press. And the first component of that we think is connection. Connection meaning that when we're in community together, we have to gather together. We have to get to know one another. We have to speak to one another. We have to be in conversation. And so a community that is not connected is just a bunch of people together. I don't know what you call that, a concert maybe, I don't know. But if y'all don't got no connection, y'all ain't doing no community, right? Kind of work, because you have to know one another. We also think that there is a level of commitment that is necessary in a community, whether it's commitment around the common goals you all have shared, whether it's commitment to the values that you all have created, whether it's commitment to each other and what it is that you're struggling towards. But you have to be committed to something and to someone within that community framework. And then lastly, we're looking at the idea of mutual accountability, which means that when we exist in the community, I am as accountable to you as you are to me, right? And there is a clear pathway of how we reach accountability within this community. And so that means understanding that that accountability is for everybody. Now we have to create a clear structure of what that looks like. And so these are just 3 components of how we've looked at community. Really quickly, Bo, we can stop share. And what I want to ask you all in the chat, or you can speak in person, y'all don't be scared now. We ain't gonna bite y'all. Y'all could talk to us now, okay? Like, we want to hear y'all talk. And chat. Y'all so brilliant to us. We want all of the thoughts. And so my question to you all is, tell me a little bit about how you all understand community and what you define as community.
Happy. Hi, everyone. This is Leo. I'm wearing a white shirt and a green cap, and I have black glasses on. I'm happy to start the discussion here. And the first thing that came to mind for me was that in community spaces, the unit isn't the individual, but rather the relationship. And that is how I like to cultivate community and move through it, and not think of myself as just like one piece that makes up the space, but rather that it's my relationships that make up my community.
I love that. Kate said that they loved what Leo said. The unit isn't the individual, but the relationship. Liz said one of the many intersecting layers of networked relations between individuals. Ooh, Liz, that's a whole little philosophical thing you just dropped on us. Lord Jesus, we want the essay. Give us the essay, please, Liz. Who else? How do you all see community? How do you understand? How do you exist in communities?
I kind of like to think of the idea of trust. I apologize. I am in a tan black dress and a black undershirt with a black headscarf and golden hoop earrings, and nails that I just got done today. But I like to think of community as kind of in the way that Leo, I think, was saying, that was beautifully put, and we'll try to live up to that. But the idea of, like my commitment to you and your commitment to me, and that idea that, again, it's about the relationship, and that's kind of how trust is built, is that we're committing to each other. And I think that that's sometimes better, at least in my opinion, than something larger, because if you're actually committing to the well-being of people, you're not really getting lost in like the philosophical or the theoretical, and you're really looking at the people that you're in relationship with and that you're affecting and that are affecting you. And so I feel like that's always really important.
Go ahead now, Queen, with the cute nails that you just got done today. That's what I'm talking about. And Paige said, Kate said, committed to care. And Paige said, as something welcoming of vulnerability. Go ahead now, Paige. Yes, Katie, I've been waiting. I've been itching for you to raise your hand.
Oh no, I'm Katie. I am Jewish and Armenian descent, white passing, and I have long brown hair parted in the middle, and big eyebrows, and a white sweatshirt with little it's Olympic vintage. It's a long story, but a white sweatshirt with an Olympic graphic in a bedroom with some with a mint wall and some sunlight bursting in. And I loved everything that's been said so much. And I think a lot about how, because sometimes community forms for me around shared making. And so through that, like third space, as Leo said and others have echoed, like a relationship gets amplified over the individual. And then also through that, building trust through how all the parties wish to be seen, wish to be visible, wish to not be seen, and building that trust for respecting that, the terms of seeing each other and hearing each other, and sustaining that trust.
Ooh, that was spicy. This is Bofina, the turn. Ooh, I like that. Can you type that in the box? Because I want to make sure please, I got to use that again. That was so brilliant. Thank you. Okay, you all. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts on community. You can keep putting it in the chat box, but we felt that it would be important for us to kind of have that conversation of what we consider. And on top of that, we know that especially in organizing spaces, something that I've seen is folks calling people, saying that they're in community with people, but not actually how did you get there? How did you, who told you that? How do you know? How do you know that you're in community with them? What have you done to let you know? Have they told you that they're in community with you, right? Because often what happens is that our assumption that we're in community with someone impacts accountability, because now you're attempting to hold someone accountable who you're not even in community with. And then it conflicts a little bit. And so it's important that we're having these conversations of like, are you in consensual community, which means that it has been an intentional conversation to say, we're in this thing together. And so please continue to share your thought. We're going to go ahead and share screen again. And so this video that we're about to see, it does have closed captioning, and we will have the captions up. This is from a talk with Robin D.G. Kelly. Oh, he just so fine to me, y'all. I ain't gonna lie to y'all now. I might have to razzle dazzle and patriarchy a little bit, but that's for another time. But Robin D.G. Kelly, Angela Davis, and Fred Moten. And what they do is Robin asked this question about how do we continue to build worlds without prisons, without police, and without all of these interlocking oppressions that we now face. And Fred Moten gives this beautiful poetic answer about the importance of sharing space, like simply being together as a collective. And so we wanted to play this video as a way for us to transition into our next activity.
What do we do? How do we continue to imagine a world without prisons? And what do we gain by making these demands even when we don't win them right away? In other words, how is the radical imagination useful or necessary to stay engaged through struggle? You know, and how can we sustain that? Just in your ideas. And we could start with Fred.
Well, I mean, I think a big part of it is evenings like tonight, but also imagining the continued forms of fellowship in groups as large as this, but even more importantly, in groups much smaller than this, that can emerge as a function of all of us being here tonight. And it's not just about the ways in which we get together to fight what it is that the state and capital are trying constantly to do to us. Mm-hmm. It's also about the ways in which, when we get together, we are engaged in that ongoing experiment of how to be together and to live together in a different way.
Right.
I think I remember one time actually in our house in North Carolina when you were staying with us one night, and I asked this question. Sometimes you think for something so long that you can finally boil it down to the simplest, almost kind of naive question, because it turns out that what you were thinking about was a miracle, right? And I was like, well, how did the civil rights movement even happen? You know,
right.
It wasn't supposed to happen.
Right.
It's miraculous. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
And then in the course of, and I began to think after Robin was talking to me that when I think of the meetings, the mass meetings, the meetings that my mom used to take me to, when I think of all those meetings, I think, what if it turned out that what it is that people were really fighting for was not the right to assimilate into a culture that excluded them? What if they were trying to fight for the right to keep meeting just like that all the time,
right,
as much as they could, without the duress?
Right.
And it reminds me now of a moment reading this wonderful book called Architecture After Revolution by one of the people who wrote the book is this great Palestinian architect and architectural theorist named Sandy Hillel. And she talked about this practice that Palestinians engage in, a practice of collective land ownership called al-masha. And it's a form of collective land cultivation. And what's amazing about it is that it makes it more difficult for the Israeli state to expropriate land that is cultivated collectively. It's as if they have to posit an individual landowner in order to then to be able to take the land. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so what she says in this book is that this practice of al-masha, of collective land ownership, she talks about it as a form of self-defense. It's a mode of practice that actually defends itself in its own practice, right? That the more they did it, the more it was able to sustain itself against the grain of all that violence. And so I guess what I'm thinking of is some, way for us to continue to cultivate our own habits of al-masha. Mm-hmm. That we have already been cultivating forever, that Melanie was talking about, that this church represents, We just have to keep on practicing getting together.
That's right.
Keep on practicing living our lives.
All right, you all.
What do we do? How do we?
Thank you. We can stop share. Thank you, folks. And you all can, I guess we can pause really quickly and give people just a minute. If you want to finish writing whatever note that you were writing, I will put the link to the full talk in the chat for you all, or if anyone want to share any thoughts on that video before we move into the activity.
Hi, group one. We actually didn't pick a speaker. Catalina and Dana, do either of you want to kick us off? I can also, if y'all don't want to. Okay, I'll start us off, and I hope that y'all will chime in whenever. So we had a big conversation around communication and how a lot of times the roles that we play aren't actually the gifts that we want to cultivate. And so we tried to come up with a few kind of suggestions for things that we might feel would be helpful to us to move into the gifts that we want to cultivate rather than the roles that we sometimes don't want to play. And one resource that Dana pointed out was this Mapping Our Roles in Social Change Ecosystem by Deepa Iyer that we'll also put in the Google Doc because it's a really great resource. And so the first image that we have on our slide is this chart that Deepa Iyer came up with. That's basically, it has a yellow circle in the middle and it says equity, liberation, justice, and solidarity. And then there's lines that swerve outward with a few circles around the main circle that are in different colors that outline different roles that people play in the ecosystem. So it says in one circle, experimenters, frontline responders, visionaries, builders, caregivers, disruptors, healers, storytellers, guides, and weavers. And I'll hand it off to another group member to explain our other ideas.
Dana, would you like to?
Would you like it?
Well, I'll take the first two. So just that on the one hand, to notice what people are good at, what they're passionate about, and they'll probably do the best job with that kind of work. And so it's good to support people's exciting visions. And then the top one is that you kind of have to balance that with work that maybe nobody wants to do, or maybe gets feminized or gets allocated to certain people for reasons that are not, because, you know, it's just work that maybe is not fun for anyone. So we have to, well, that's what I was thinking. Make invisible labor visible would be, I guess, a way of valuing that work. But I was also thinking of like distributing. There's sometimes work that isn't pleasant for anyone. Dana, would you like to talk about the last two?
Sure. Thanks, Catalina and Kimmy. So our last two ideas were to support people's ideas, to give them space to articulate what gifts they want to cultivate and what resources or support they might need to cultivate those, and then to recognize when we don't feel supported and communicating those instances and trying to be more explicit about what kind of support we need. So, yeah.
Thank you all so much, group one. All right, so let's go to group two. So I know group two don't got nothing up there, but that's okay. Y'all, you know what I'm saying? Y'all want to go, y'all still got this.
It's a metaphor.
Oh, I love that. Something.
No, I'm just joking. Didn't you tell I did art in college? I can make a fake up. No, I'm Kate speaking for group two, and our page is blank. We were not feeling the expectations of filling a square, and we were tired, and so, which were both things that we spoke about in our group of what does it mean to hold space, to be flexible and not be able to show up with the gifts that you normally do, and know that, you know, the expectations have to be maybe held a little looser. So it is a metaphor after all. But we were speaking about the gift sharing question that really resonated with group two. and what it would take to make a community of gift sharing. And the one piece that really sort of, I think, became the focus of our conversation was defining how that community, much like in the video we saw, would be living the world we want to see. That making a community focused on gift sharing and relationship is that making real a post-white colonial capitalist world, because it's not relying on such an individualistic expectations of production and performance. Instead, it's focused on the collective and the idea of what we can all bring. And one of the comments was cultivating collective authority and expertise rather than a hierarchical authority or individuals. And that sort of being able to ask for the gifts or know when to bring the gifts of that collective expertise. We were also highlighting like what would really need to be in there. And one of the things was to be seen, to be validated, to be needed, to be useful, but under a different value system than what we have now. So useful to the relationship, not in under capitalism, and to be vulnerable. Group 2, did I hit that right? All right, got some thumbs up.
This is Bofina speaking. Thank you so much, Group 2. I love that y'all being rebel rousers now. That's what I'm talking about. We ain't gonna use this piece of paper. Go ahead now, little artist. Let's go to group number 3. Thank y'all. Oh, we got another rebel rouser group. Ooh, y'all shaking the table today. I'm loving it. All right, group 3, tell us about y'all philosophical blank slide, because I'm feeling it.
Didn't have a designated speaker either. I'm happy to start off summarizing what we talked about. Okay, we talked we touched on a bunch of different things, and the conversation started off by talking about how we are socialized or even taught to compete, to be in competition with one another, and that this happens in the classroom where even just like the layout of the classroom is focused on one person and it's very hierarchical. And Cece was sharing about some techniques that she utilizes in her classroom to flatten that hierarchical structure to cultivate more of a group and community dynamic. I'm going to start there and pass it off to my other group members.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I guess I can introduce myself. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in LA, in my bedroom. I'm Korean American and wearing a yellow shirt and glasses. Yeah, I think our group, we really fixated on kind of the previous question or the previous breakout group. The question kind of identifying different group dynamics and power dynamics that exist within group dynamics. One of the things that we were discussing and exploring was how to meet each other in some kind of collectivized or collaborative situation, or even in a more casual incident or situation on even grounds. Often that pretense has not been set, thus there are a lot of kind of invisible dynamics that are at play, and it's often difficult to navigate that. So I think a lot of our questions revolved around like the how prevalent that is and how it exists within our professional or experiential world of practice. Yeah, highlighted by Leo's detailing of Cece's classroom structures. I talked about kind of different, or we also discussed different kind of perspectives, different cultural perspectives to group engagement, how more homogenized societies or collectivized societies differ versus more individually slanted or yeah, I guess more individualistic cultures. And that's, although kind of a general description, describes kind of pretenses in which we engage in situations. The example that I use is that in often individualized situations, we stand in lines, and there's a kind of assumed sense of priority based on when we decided to engage with that one thing versus in other more collectivized societies, things resemble kind of a group, and there's a assumed and preconceived idea of urgency or priority. An example being like an older person being addressed first or served first, or their needs coming first before those that are younger, more able-bodied. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Cece. I don't want to speak too much for the group.
I think that was good. I'm gonna put there's something from my notes I'm gonna put in the chat, and I'm gonna pass the Zoom mic to onward. That was great.
Lit. Thank y'all so much. All right, so we can continue. So group 3, you all good? All right, let's move to group 4. Oh, it's an avocado.
Nadine speaking for group 4. So I'm going to present like 4 points that we kind of agreed on. We were talking about, and there's also an image on the slide, an appropriated pulled down image from Giphy featuring an half avocado, which seed is dropping out. The seed has like a smiley face, and the avocado is picking it up, and it's animated in cartoon style. So I'm going to bring these 4 points up, but I also urge my group members to unflatten me in the way I present this. We were talking about the gifts we bring to each other and realization of ourselves in that context. So the first one was, also I need to mention one more thing. I put this avocado image in here without the consent of my group members. So yeah, transgression here. The first point we made was that complementary ways of being can create like a good dynamic with another person if one can embrace that. So that's the first point. The second point is the willingness for flexibility. Please disregard the latter end. So just kind of understanding the tethering of a situation, or like how that's always needs to be like renegotiated with one's own needs, but also one's own strengths. Being straightforward about potential negativity. I think that's also really useful, but it's not my point, but like just kind of the parameters of what could go wrong as a helpful as a helpful contribution to not maybe, and now I'm saying something that was outside of the group, just kind of interpreting this as to just not gloss over things that could go in a different direction. And number 4 is being transient as a way of participation. Maybe sometimes it's not always being in a firm place that can add to the exchange as a positive, and not always seen as a negative in terms of an absence. And I pop over the floor to my other fellow group, or not fellow, but group members. And thank you for listening.
This is so cute. I love this so much, y'all. Thank you so much. All right. So I believe that wraps up all of 4 of our groups, right? Perfect. And so we can actually stop share.
Okay, I've been thinking about how resource scarcity mindset impacts our ability to participate, cultivate, and engage in community. And I'm thinking particularly to our current health crisis and how that impacts like at the beginning of quarantine when things started to shut down, there was a panic to go to the grocery store, and grocery stores took a while to be able to restock, and it impacted a variety of different people. It became really hard to access necessary sanitizing materials, and just kind of stepping outside of pandemic as the example. How do y'all like navigate resource scarcity in a community setting such that it doesn't negatively impact everybody?
So in case the question was missed, it is how to navigate resource scarcity within your existing communities. I'm going to write this down in the chat real quick. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? You can raise your hand.
This is Bofina speaking. I think part of the conversation I've been having specifically, this is in regards to environmental justice, but we've been talking about degrowth. And for folks who aren't familiar with degrowth, is the understanding that just because the earth has an ample amount of something doesn't mean we need to use it all. And that we have to be mindful and ethical in the ways in which we engage with how we do so. But part of that has been really within at least my communities, us reconditioning how we view resources, and how we view like the ample amount of like, part of that scarcity is because of capitalism, right? And folks' mindset, like there just never will ever be enough of anything for any of us. But I think a lot of that mindset, I believe, is guided by like the greediness of capitalism. And so for me, what I focus on is, what do we have in our communities and how are we using them now? Because I think oftentimes we have this need to think about like, well, if we had $9 million, what would we do with it? Well, if we had $30, what would we do with that? Because right now we don't even know what to do with $30. And so I've reframed that question a bit for my community to be less about what are the more resources that we need and more about what are we doing with the resources that we have right now. And I think for me, reframing that has allowed folks to see the ways in which we're not even engaging ethically with what we do have access to. And now we simply want more and more and more. And then within a lot of organizing communities, what we've seen is that the bigger the budget, it does not make it better. And so you have an organization, for example, like Black Lives Matter, that we just found out got $90 million in donations, and nobody knows where that $90 million has gone. And so it's an example of where a community had a scarcity of resources, and then they received an ample amount of resources, and now they don't know what to do with that ample amount because the conditions and the skill of using the small that they had was not there. And so that's kind of how I've been approaching that question of scarcity.
Thank you, Delphina. It's Vale again. Does anyone else want to add on or have any questions that might relate to Leo's? Go ahead, Andrew.
I really appreciate the framework of where that scarcity comes from, especially in that conversation of like fiscal scarcity. I think that is a very it's kind of like widely accepted experience, whether you are flush with resources or working with less, it's something that we're subject to. The things that came to mind were, what if we replaced like capital or fiscal scarcity with like interpersonal or emotional scarcity or resources? This is just kind of like a brief framework of things that I've experienced, and I'm curious if other people have, when maybe even like a dynamic is demanding of yourself, and it boils down to like whether I like how like the decisions you make to engage or not to engage, to lean in or to omit that situation. It becomes really difficult to navigate because it kind of straddles the line of your own well-being and being cognizant and aware of your like what you're going through and what you need in the moment, but also not falling into temptation to use that same framework to dismiss an individual, or I mean, not even just on a personal sense. I've witnessed that happening, and not really understand, or not having a solution to know how to engage with that. But I'm just curious what other people's impressions are.
Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead, Kate.
I want to acknowledge also from Leo's question, I think we also saw a bit during the pandemic of this shift, or this wrestling with resiliency and with the just clear acknowledgement of mutual aid in communities. And I think and I'm in agreement with all of the ideas that have been coming out, but I think back to a debate that we had in New Orleans around sort of post BP oil spill, like right after Katrina, was this sort of like, we're sick of being told to be resilient. Like, and so we even like did this whole actions around like, fuck resilience, it's revolution, because it was just like tired of being told to like just make do with what you've got, and you can do it, and oh, you're so great, you made do with what you've got. And so I'm totally in the space of the scarcity mindset needs to be battled, and we can think about things differently and lift up the emotional space. But I also think that there is a relationship between like, it's almost like thinking about those things through a vein of what does it look like when we're not in scarcity. I'm struggling with what it means. But I'm putting it in a revolutionary frame rather than a make do resilience frame, and just that tweak to me feels important. And how that relates to Andrew's is, I was hearing the like, how do we make space for emotional work in this too? And the like, and for me, the revolutionary space of that, rather than the resilience is we've got this space to deal with all of our traumas. Let's take care, let's deal with it. Revolutionary to me is saying, let's think about how to grieve differently and acknowledge grief and make space for mourning, and like actually center trauma and talk about it when we're coming. It just feels like I'm struggling with it, but there's something there. I'm thinking, I don't know. That's all.
Just one last question. This is Queen also. I'd love to just ask the group really quick, is what grounds you when you are entering community? And I feel like that's a really vague question, but I want it to be intentionally vague. But I always think that, like something that my grandmother always says that grounds her in her community, which is like Muslim community here in Cambridge, is food. And that's what grounds her, is being able to make food and be able to make like Southern food and be able to do that with community is something that she values. And so I just would love to ask people, like, what makes you feel grounded in community?
Thank you for that question, Queen. That just reminds me so much of a lot of the work that we've done as a collective with Press. So many of our gatherings center around bringing food and just having the space to experience each other's different, loves of food, and especially knowing that we all come from so many different backgrounds. I agree with that. I think it is such a grounding tool to bring people together. And to cultivate conversation and to even just ease people. But yeah, communal eating, like Bowman just said, that's very important. Thank you for bringing that. Lydia?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge the question that had been asked earlier in this workshop about what is the purpose of the workshop. And just to acknowledge that was also on my mind, and I'm glad that somebody asked that. At the same time, I've really enjoyed being in this kind of ambiguous state and just seeing what comes up. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself, but we're at the end. I'm just kind of curious what your hopes of the organizers are for the participants after the workshop. And thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Lydia. Does anyone from the team want to take this question on? Oh, Kimmy, did you just unmute? Oh, okay. Go ahead, friend.
Yeah, I think one of the purposes, this is Kimmy speaking, was just to kind of share our process for building our toolkit and kind of share this resource with you so that, we invite you all to kind of take it and make it your own and hopefully host your own kind of conversations or workshops or whatever form it might take to kind of, learn from and share your own experiences and the tools that you all have cultivated in your experiences. And also just create a space where we can kind of affirm in a way that, the reason that we created the toolkit in the first place was our way of affirming that the resources and expertise and experiences and tools that often help us navigate the challenges that we experience already exist in our community if we just take the time to kind of come together and talk to one another. Hopefully I did that justice, y'all.
Oh, Kimmy, you're so cute. Oh, she's so cute. I just love her so much. That was excellent. And I think also the last thing I'll add is this thing of what I always say is, what does it mean to gather with community without purpose? And I think that is something that, once again, capitalism has stripped away from us. This idea that whenever we gather into community, we have to have this big old grand plan, rather than honoring the fact that every time we gather as community, we're practicing and learning what it means to be in principled struggle with other human beings, that we're practicing what it means to talk to other human beings, that we're practicing what it means to have differences and still exist in the same space as other human beings. And so I think I'm in a space of consistently challenging people's idea that when they come into a space, that simply looking at other human beings, learning from other human beings, seeing the mannerisms of another person is not work. Because to me, as a restorative practices specialist who is in circles all day, this right here, this is the work. They're just the simple talking. That is the most important work of creating the cultures in the world that we want to exist in, except we don't see that as value. And so I think that, to me, coming into the space was like, once again, emphasizing that looking and learning from another human being is an honor in itself, and that we have to honor that process as it is. And so that's my little piece to that.
Okay, y'all. It's Vale again. I think this is a good place to wrap up our Q&A. I'm not entirely sure. Lou, do I pass on to you now?
Sure, we'll just do this really
let's go ahead.
quickly. Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's Lou again. We just want to do a really quick kind of gratitude for you all. Thank you all for spending time with us, for spending more time maybe than you intended to today. We really appreciate the opportunity to share the space and learn with you. And just, on your way out of our session, we invite you to send a private message to someone who maybe you shared a moment with today that you want to share an appreciation with. And we can continue this conversation through email for anyone who's interested. We'll reach back out through your Eventbrite registration. So thank you all again for your time and energy today.